Kevin Hart didn't keep going.
Yeah, yeah. This is just kind of
Thank you.
because he has laugh out loud.
Oh.
That's a neater way to push your.
Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for coming to the Marketing in the Trump Era panel. My name is David Jones. I'm the CEO of the Cipher Group, which is an interactive solutions and brand marketing company out of New York City. And so before we begin, I would like for our panelists to also introduce themselves, starting with Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Valentino. I'm the Senior Vice President Group Publisher for Pride Media, which is the Advocate, Out, Chill, Pride.com, and Plus magazines and websites.
Fantastic. I'm Kennedy, and I host a show called Kennedy. Weeknights, right now it's at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 in the West. And on October 15th, we move to 9 p.m. And it is a nightly libertarian political talk show.
Hi, my name is Pamela Tsai, and I'm with the Sound of Hope, America's largest Chinese language radio station. We reach about 1.5 million Chinese Americans across the nation, and 90% of them are first-generation immigrants.
Greetings. My name is Charlemagne the God. I'm a nationally syndicated radio personality, TV personality, author.
Javier Farfan. I spent 18 years at brands like Microsoft, PepsiCo, and Verizon. And now I started my own consultancy advisory firm for culture and lifestyle and entertainment.
All right, great. So let's get into it. So everyone on the panel is either a brand themselves with a message or has worked with brands to assist the brands with their messaging. Trump has affected everyone on this panel, as well as everyone in this room, from the NFL to the Wall to Me Too to Black Lives Matters. How has Trump's presidency affected your marketing and/or messaging to your audience? Joe?
Well, our audience is hungry for authenticity, and the Advocate has been telling our audience the truth for 50 plus years now. And marketing partners understand that we're a trusted voice, and thus that trust then translates to marketing partners. We launched in 1967. That was 2 years prior to the Stonewall riots. And we launched as a single-page black and white mimeograph newsletter that was sold for 25 cents behind a bar, and it was called Pride back then, and that's where the word originated. Pride meaning personal rights and defense of education. And for the past 50 years, we continue to report news and information to keep our audience very well educated so they can make the right decisions. We work very closely with marketing partners. They come into the marketplace and they work with us, and we consult in regards to creative, and they tailor their messages to speak to us in first person, and that way they seem to get the most bang for their buck.
So specifically, how has the Trump presidency changed what we do? It's interesting because when he came on the scene, a lot of people, a lot of political analysts discounted him and didn't think his candidacy was going to go anywhere. And then he made several missteps. And what's interesting is, obviously, a lot of people feel like the country is being torn apart, and there is no more polarizing person. So as a libertarian, I'm always in search for freedom in every form, whether it's economic freedom, freedom to put whatever you want into your body, freedom to make your own decisions regarding parenting, how you start a business, how you live your life. And so it's going to be a mixed bag with this presidency. But what I've realized is when I come out against the president critically, I get a lot of pushback and criticism on social media. And if I come out and give the president credit for something that he's done right, I get a lot of criticism and pushback on social media. So it's interesting. There's another libertarian panelist that I talked to recently, and we both agreed it would be so easy to completely sell out to one side or the other, and not doing that and trying to have a civil conversation really challenges us to, again, like Joe, seek the truth, because that is a very subjective thing now. The lead-in before me tends to be very pro-President Trump. And so sometimes we try and find topics where we'll have a little bit more crossover and save the criticism for later in the show.
Yeah, so our audience is very unique because 90% of them are foreign-born. They're first-generation immigrants, which means that they didn't grow up in this society. And so they came from a completely different social background. And most of them actually came from the mainland China. As you probably know, that China is one-party state controlled by the Communist Party. And the immigrants coming to this country are primarily driven by three reasons: economical, political, or religious. Because in China, if you want to organize an opposition party or want to, elect yourself, and you're going to be ending up in jail. And religious, there's no religious freedom. People get persecuted or jailed or even killed for their religious belief. And economical prosperity is only limited to those who have connections with the ruling class or the privileged class. And people who didn't have that connection will not get ahead. So that's why you're seeing the Chinese people everywhere. They're on American campus, in companies, everywhere, Chinese restaurant. And you know what? Then these people don't want to go back. And so where they came from is that they think this society is way much better than where they came from. And so sometimes they're very confused because we have the live call-in program of the Chinese immigrants working in Silicon Valley or in New York or from the Midwest, and they were very confused by the current state of the society. They didn't know why there's a renewed interest in socialism, or because they thought, we have personally experienced and witnessed experiment of the socialism in the world's largest country, China, and that's why they left the country and they didn't want to go back. So in terms of the messaging and content, we found our audience just naturally, they are leaning toward the traditional value, and that is from the cultural perspective and has nothing to do with the political environment or the political debate happening in this society. This just that they're very independent, so they're innocent if they leaning towards certain, or subscribe to any type of value because they were not part of this society. They didn't share some of the very strong emotions. And as a publisher, I think, our, principle is that we want to serve this community with truth, and and we tend to like to think that these are the people who want to know about what's going on in the society. So we don't take sides, and we give them a complete point of view, and let these people. It's their own job to determine where they want to look at, and so that's how we operate in this highly divided or polarized society. And I think as a publisher, we have a social responsibility to bring people together, not divide even further of this great country.
Yeah, I agree with everything everybody said so far. It's interesting because I always say that there's three things you should never discuss with people or to end up in an argument, and that's religion, politics, and who's the greatest rapper, Biggie or Tupac. So when it comes to Trump, I didn't, I guess because I've always been so far on the left, I lean more liberal. I didn't realize that we had so many listeners who actually, were conservative and who actually voted for Trump. So when you have these conversations about Trump and you say something, negative about him, as Kennedy said, you do get a lot of pushback from your audience. You do get a lot of pushback from social media. So it makes you wonder, do I want to, turn my audience off? Like, I don't know who has a PPM meter. PPM meter is, what they carry so you get ratings in radio. So I'm like, I don't know who has a PPM meter. But then you have to check yourself and you have to say, you know what, man? This isn't about ratings. This isn't about your brand. Like, I think that we're in a very dangerous time in our country, and I think that it's not about ratings. It's about good and evil. It's about right and wrong. It's about truth and falsehood. So you have to ask yourself, what side do I want to lean on? When it's all said and done, and this whole Trump era is over, because it will be over, whether it's 4 years or 8 years, it will be over. You want to say that you was on the right side of history, even if you take a hit in your brand, even if you take a hit in your ratings. So, for me, I think that, the best marketing strategy is just to do what I feel like, we've always done, which is just stand on truth. And that's what we do. Tell the truth, shame the devil.
I agree with everything that was said, but I'll take it from a brand perspective. So I spent most of my career, working at corporations, and there, everything was about, how do you tap into the pop culture aspects of what's going on so we can leverage that equity, right, from an entertainment lifestyle perspective. And I started my business, J. Wolf Advisors, right when he got into office. And I didn't think about like what was going to happen. I just jumped in. But now that I'm advising, I have a beverage company. What I'm starting to notice how they're looking at the world. They want to get into the essence of what America's about. So I feel like that push is happening. And it's on the positive side. I'm more left myself. So you're starting to see them having that dialogue and placing a position. When I was in corporations, people were scared to put positions because they wanted to be for everybody. And then I'm also advising a new media company that Zoe Zaldana is starting. It's called Bise. And that company is about, delivering the message of, what the Latinx experience is in the United States, right? And she's doing it because they need more voices kind of telling the truth. Nobody's really giving all of that. So I'm starting to see kind of people having a lot more substance than ever before. I was consulting at Tidal. They're really kind of enriching emerging artists. So everybody's really grounding themselves on making sure they're supporting their community, which I think is a positive thing. Hey.
Hi.
Welcome to the party.
Thank you. Happy to be
Please,
here.
excellent. Please introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Hi, everyone. My name's Amani. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of MuslimGirl.com. I chronically run on Arab timing, so sorry about that, but I'm really excited to join you all here. Yeah, 100%. There's levels to it,
So the question that everyone has answered, your time is impeccable. How has Trump's presidency affected your marketing and/or messaging to your audience?
Interestingly enough, for us, I think it's cultivated more of an effort attitude. I mean, leading up to the election, there was a period of time where Muslim Girl actually suspended its coverage of any Donald Trump story because there was one day where I opened up our homepage and it was just like saturated with story after story about him. And to me, it took away from the whole point of us having our own platform in the first place, which is to keep the conversation focused on us, our issues, our livelihoods, and the things that actually mattered. And Donald Trump just simply did not fit into that for us. And so we had to move away from that. But it also really empowered us too, because I think it gave an opportunity for a lot of allies to step up and recognize the need for more of our authentic voices in the space. And it's resulted in a lot of really awesome opportunities over the past 2 years. A lot of campaigns like Muslim Women's Day, where we saw an unprecedented level of representation for Muslim women in the mainstream, and many other things that I think, would not have been championed if we didn't all kind of have to experience this wake-up call together.
That's true.
Agree. Okay. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the U.S. will become minority white in 2044, meaning the majority-minority crossover would have taken place. No group or race will have a majority share of the total population of the U.S. when this happens. This should undoubtedly change the advertising and marketing industry. But even now, brands that pander as opposed to effectively market, have seen disastrous ramifications, i.e. the Kendall Jenner Pepsi ad. Culturally speaking,
Please don't.
what is your suggestion to brands in speaking to audiences in an authentic way without losing identity? For short, what are the do's and don'ts in marketing to the LGBT? Hold on, quick question. What is the I and the Q and the other?
Q is questioning and I is, identifying. There are so many letters that have expanded over the years.
Did you see that? I saw that and I was like, because someone said that was maybe a little bit politically incorrect, but I just didn't know. And I don't think a lot of people know. So,
talking to a community, we have about 16.8 million users a month, and the population, they say, is about 6% that self-identify as gay, but those are only people that raise their hand or check the box on the census that say I am gay, but there's another, 30, 40 million that just don't self-identify. And you have marketers or advertisers coming into the marketplace where they'll do some creative that's considered gay vague. There'll be a man walking out of a bar or a restaurant and like approaching the beach, and there's two chairs sitting there, and there's a woman and a guy, and you never know where's he going to go? Is he going to the guy or to the woman? And it's gay vague, and they feel like they've pushed the envelope enough. But our audience is so smart and clever that they can see through that. What they want is they want to be able to see themselves, envision themselves in that creative, and they want to be spoken to in first person. So they want to see a man or a female walking to another man or a female or a trans or a bi person in order to feel like they're included in that. And if people kind of pander and kind of pull back, I think, the message doesn't really resonate. Being, in a community today where, politics we're much more right than I ever imagined existed. And, we were up for a huge campaign coming out of Detroit for an automotive company, and years of working on the business, we were finally recommended. But once Trump came in and it went to the client nixed it. They did not want to be in a space that's LGBT, knowing his views on LGBT. So it's kind of, it's a tough time. There are some true players that are committed to the marketplace and talking to us in first person and are doing it right and kind of go out there and show us in their ads, and it kind of, all of the research indicates that, it's great for them, but there are others who just don't know what they're doing. We once worked for a consumer packaged goods, and it's an ointment for cold sores, and they were developing creative that they wanted to run by us, and they're like, well, will you take a look at it? And I'm like, sure, I'll share it with my staff. And they sent an ad of a guy in a lime green silk shirt with like 5 buttons open, 9 necklaces, like an iPod on his waist, a belt, like bad jeans. And I'm like, what are they thinking? Are they thinking that this is going to resonate? Because I'm offended by this. I don't know anyone. I mean, I may have seen someone that looks like this, but this is not my day-to-day. And, we work with a lot of spirits company, gays and lesbians. We drink a lot. And, this one big, liquor brand sends an ad with 3 drag queens. And it's like Joe, Bob, and David by day, and like Gina, Licorice, and something by night. And I'm like, I'm not that at night either. I mean, I could almost get the humor, but it's just, when it's done wrong, it's really off-putting. So it's just better to kind of keep it clean, keep it safe, speak to us in first person, and kind of move on.
Being driven, am I on? Hi. Being driven by political philosophy and not a party, it's really easy to see how society's gotten very bifurcated and, very politically entrenched. And that's how it feels. It's like you're on this team or you're on that team. And if you're on this team, you hate that team. And I can't stand that because, I would really like to see the rise in independent parties. And we talk about this a lot on my show. I've interviewed a lot of libertarians and green candidates and people from different parties, and that was actually the more interesting story of the presidential campaign, is how those philosophies were working their way into mainstream politics. And we're seeing that now. You're seeing that really on the progressive side. I would like to see that on the liberty-driven side. Libertarians are always hopeful, but they're so individualistic. It's just annoying, present company included. But what I think is interesting about that is if you do see more independent candidates, is that you'll see less left versus right, Democrat versus Republican, and more coalitions. And I would like to see that in society. And instead of, we are this team, you cannot be a part of this team, because if you try and be a part of this team, you're guilty of cultural appropriation. Whereas someone might just be curious and they might want to know more about your team. And so if we can create not just political coalitions, but cultural as well, where people are curious and people are looking for that sort of authenticity as they are trying to forge their own identities, because even and being in a postmodern political world, the notion of identity changes, and what we can't forget is no one has the right to tell you what your identity is. And it's very interesting, especially, I have 2 girls, and watching them grow up in a place like New York City, which is so vastly different than where I grew up in New York, and the input that they have and the way they form their sense of self is fascinating. And, we don't know where that's going to lead. I hope it leads to more honest and open discussions and a natural curiosity instead of this constant animosity.
Yeah. So coming back to the first generation immigrants from Asia, which happens to be the nation's fastest growing minority group since the last census in 2010. And especially about the Chinese audience who originally came from the mainland China. I think that, people tend to be put off by the, getting political into the brand or advertising or business because they lived through the Cultural Revolutionary, the Tiananmen Massacre, and all this political turbulence that happened in China. And so it was considered dividing if brand take on the political message or using a brand ambassador who's stood up for any political message. So I think talking about safe space for brand, I think it's better to find what unites people. Like America is a melting pot. There are people from vast differently cultural, religious, and ethical background. What brings people together? I think that would be the safest place. And in the Asian culture, if because back in China during the Cultural Revolutionary, the political correctness actually turned people against each other. Husband against from wife, and it was just not a compassionate and harmonious society. And so if people here in this country, they say if they're buying a consumer brand or wearing a pair of sneakers, which is considered political sensitive, they may not want to buy that because they don't want to offend the feelings of their loved ones. So it's a tricky, position for brand if they want to take on the political, stance. But again, in this society, you're afraid to make decision, but you're not afraid from the consequence. If you don't want to alienate the other 0.5% of the population, you might want to give more thoughts.
I'm actually going to speak at Converse and Nike's diversity panel tomorrow, and kudos to them. Marketers and branding people, you should feel something, even if you hate it. You don't want to just watch a commercial and it's just a commercial. You want to invoke emotion and feeling. So what they did with Colin Kaepernick was amazing, because it evoked emotion. Whether you went and burnt some Nikes, which is the dumbest thing I ever heard. Give it away if you don't want it. But it evoked emotion, and Nike sales went up 31%. They won. End of the day. Can you do me a favor? Can you speak also, I want you to kind of take the question from two different points of view, culturally speaking, from hip hop, because you're definitely a member of the hip hop community, as well as African American, which, those can be two different things.
Well, I think the answer to the question is simple, and I just think that diversity matters. I think that, your workspace, your boardroom, your advisors should be just as diverse as this panel right here. I work for iHeartRadio, and, sometimes we'll be in meetings, and it'll be a bunch of people in there that's 40 years and up, and they'll be like, so what do 20-year-olds like? Well, why don't you go get some 20-year-olds? Bring them in the room and let's ask them. Like, I just think that when you make, you see stuff like the Pepsi commercial with Kendall Jenner, mistakes like that get made because you got a boardroom full of culturally clueless white men trying to tell everybody how they should feel. Well, I know how young 20-year-old girls think. Well, where the 20-year-old girls? Right. All of y'all 50, 60 years old. So I just think that, it's just that simple. Diversity matters, and you will not make those mistakes if you have people that represent who you're trying to sell to in those rooms. Like, why is a group of men trying to market to a bunch of women, trying to say what a bunch of women like? Why is it a bunch of white people trying to say what black people like? Why is it a bunch of straight people trying to say what gay people like? Like, diversity matters. You have to have diversity in your boardrooms, and you won't make those mistakes.
I worked at
a
Pepsi.
Latino perspective.
All right, I'll do Latino, and then I'll talk about Pepsi because I worked there. So,
Was it you?
No, it wasn't me. It actually, so it happened after I left, but I know the organization that it was a part of that made that happen, and it's true. The people that were making the decisions were a little clueless in culture, not even in so, and they were women and men in there, so it wasn't just men. So they just made poor decisions. What they were trying to do is tap into this idea of creator, right? Like the creative community, and they tapped in and they had the right insight. But as it went up the channels of decisions, and you have this person that needs to weigh into the decision, it gets, diluted, right? And then everybody has to put, I got a great idea. Jenner is going to be there. It's going to be big now. And then that's where it went left. You know what I'm saying? So that's what happens. And it's unfortunate, but organizations and corporations behave like that, right? Because there's so many layers. So
You don't think it was just left to think that a can of soda would just stop
the
racial
riots. Yeah, stop all racial
That's
tension in
where it went
America.
left. Like it was just bad. For
yeah, it was bad.
It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
bad. But, okay,
But the insight was, you know, they were trying to go into the insight that there's a movement and, you know, they want to tap into that. They could have done it in a different way of supporting the movement as opposed to doing a commercial about the movement.
Right.
Right?
And then you hand the cops the Pepsi. Why not hand the protesters the Pepsi?
All right, let's get to the Latin thing now. 'Cause I don't want to keep on so on the Latin side, you know, it's challenging because, you know, our community is a silent community, right? We don't like to like go out there and like be the face of stuff. And I think what's happening now, you're starting to see people being a little bit more vocal. And I think that corporations and brands are trying to tap into that, but they still silo it. Right? And that's the challenge with the money, right? So it's all about, it comes down to the money. So there's, let's say, $100 for everybody to make a campaign. You know, the highest people that are making the decisions take $80 out of that $100, right? Because they're more senior and they want to do this type of campaign. And then the folks that are doing the Hispanic campaign or the Latin campaign get $10 to do something, and then they don't make a move. They don't make any type of traction. And then it's diluted in what it is. So it doesn't usually work because they're not senior leaders kind of driving that agenda back to your point. And I still see that happening a lot, you know? So, but there are other players that are kind of getting into the space and trying to create a different identity, like Zoe Saldana and the B-Say movement. So hopefully those things kind of work.
Amani, from a Muslim perspective, what are some of the do's and don'ts?
I mean,
from
from a human perspective, to be honest.
Sure, let's go.
Because it's like, just to echo some of the stuff that was stated already, you know, when we're talking teams, for example, you know, and like cultural appropriation, it's like, it's kind of like what you were saying, Charlamagne. It's like if your team is all white people, but you're curious about cornrows, then you're still culturally appropriating, whether you like it or not. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about the things you're curious about, it's about the human beings and building those connections. And I feel like that's something that's been lacking in marketing because, yeah, like, it's really awesome to see this increase of diversity within campaigns, and brands are really waking up to the fact that people come in different colors and shapes and, you know, like, and tongues and things like that. But look at Muslim women, for example. I think that everyone in this room can agree that over the past 2 or 3 years, we've literally seen a surge of visibility for veiled Muslim women in marketing like never before, especially not in my life since 9/11 happened, right? But at the same time, it's like, are these brands that are using our imagery because they know they're gonna go viral on social media, get more PR than they could possibly pay for by doing that, are they genuinely giving a damn about those Muslim women or about those communities that they're trying to market to? Because let me tell you, when the Muslim ban happened, how many of those brands stood up to say, hey, you can't talk about our constituents that way, they're human beings?
That's a good point.
Not a single one. So it's awesome when we see like brands that are integrating, you know, like cultural icons now, activism, because they know that people care about Black Lives Matter and they're not going to escape that on social media. But it's like the most important thing that any company and any brand can do is, yes, absolutely make sure like your boards and your teams, your rooms all reflect the world around us, but also make sure that you actually genuinely, authentically are caring about those communities and are trying to do something that's productive for them too, and isn't just profiting off of them or turning this beautiful moment of potential and empowerment into one of exploitation. That's what we want to avoid.
I agree with Amani so much on that because that's why I can't give Nike like so much credit for signing Colin Kaepernick, because it's like they're selling guns to both sides. Because you sign Colin Kaepernick, but then on the other hand, you sponsor the NFL, which is the organization that is blackballing Colin Kaepernick. So, you know, to me, I just look at it as a good business move. Like, you know, there was a good business move to sign Colin Kaepernick, but I'm not going to act like the Nike logo is the new Black Power fist.
No, but they won.
Yeah.
They did win. But I hear you what you're saying. Finally, usually when I do panels, there's no time for Q&A, like ever, because we just keep talking. I want to turn it over to the audience. Are there any questions? Sure.